Okay, so let's get started. We have 1 minute left, so we will just talk about this introduction while other people join. So this topic, how it got started with, and why I want to talk about this automation of configuration manager and how we did it. So in last year MMS, we were talking to some of the folks in, like you here sitting, and we were talking that we have done a lot of work in the technology, but we are still old school style, like go to the same wizard and do the work manually. What is changing and what you guys have done it? And I didn't have the good answer that time. I said, really? That's true. We are still doing the same. Even the technology is there. We are still doing the old style. And that made me an inspiration and gone back to and talked to the team, and team came with the idea, and we made their dream successful. And that, if you ask me that, what is the one thing I'm proud of from last year MMS to this year, this is the story I'm proud of. And that's what we are going to talk about, that how we have automated the deployment of configuration manager, whether it's an upgrade or whether it's a net new deployment through orchestrator. Also, this isn't just an idea. It doesn't limit to configuration manager. In your environment, you might be using other technologies for upgrade, like server operations manager, or you have LOB application. And if you want to look into that, what you do, the repetitive work every day, you can use the same framework. It's kind of framework and idea which I want you to share with you guys, that you can go and try in your environment in different ways. And we will, as part of the session, as you all guys are joining today, we will give you all the script which we wrote together. So what you can be benefited that rather than starting from the zero, you can get some of the ready-made scripts. You can modify as you want and make your own script if you want. That way we want to help you guys. So with that, I would like to introduce myself. I'm a Sitanshu Verma. I'm a service engineering manager. And my team at Microsoft is responsible for managing all configuration manager related services and serving Microsoft as a customer. So we are also a part of operations and engineering team along with the testing org which owns the product. So what it means that we are sailing in two boats at the same time. One is that make sure that configuration manager hierarchy is a production hierarchy, and we provide all services just like patching, software distribution, as you guys do in your enterprise, the same way we do the same target or compliance and SLAs. At the same time, the second goal we have it to compliance with the testing team to help them releasing the quality product. What does it mean? That whenever they come with the new build or new version of configuration manager, we go and deploy in production. So for example, there was a when you have deployed configuration manager 2012 when it was RTM, when what we have done before it was RTM, we have deployed 12 times in production, and that 12 times means 3,000 desktops to be upgraded 12 times for the client upgrade, and same time the entire hierarchy was upgraded 12 times. So that's why we said that we do almost every month. There's something going on at Microsoft in configuration manager hierarchy or in the production. So it's a consistent and evolving change we do at Microsoft. I would like to introduce Arun, who is a main engineer who has worked on this solution.
Hi, I'm Arun Ramakrishnan, and I work with Shitanshu's team, and I was involved in actually using this technology, using Orchestrator and our custom framework built on top of Orchestrator to deploy this in our environment. And I did want to make one small correction. Every time it was not 3,000 clients, we had to update 300,000 desktops.
300,000, yes, good. Not 300. Thanks, Arun. So on the session objectives, what we are going to share is about the idea and the methodology, what we have used it for automation, and we want to demonstrate in the real world example what we have made and how many times we have used it and what we have gained. What we would like you to take away lessons from this session, when you go out, you think about the scenarios where you can implement this kind of automation. Or we also want you to think during the session or after the session that how you can use the script which we have wrote and you can start something like that. And those are the things we want you to as a key takeaways. And we will give you the download links where we have uploaded all these scripts, and you can use it as for your automation. So with that, how many of you are aware of or have done scripting or aware of orchestrator? Almost 30-40% hands. That's good. So this session is all the things we are going to talk about, making an assumption that you know some kind of scripting, as well as awareness of orchestrator. If you're not aware of the orchestrator, I can refer some of the session, and it's required some basic understanding of orchestrator and some administrator. I'm not looking for some advanced users that you should be advanced user of orchestrator. If I have to share my personal team experience, where we started this project, we probably have 1 or 2 people in my team who knows that orchestrator. If you ask today, there are probably 10 people who knows the orchestrator. And it was not so tough to learn it. It was just an adoption, and it's a learning curve where we started and where we are. And I can assume that everyone knows configuration manager. Is it true? Yep, I'm seeing a lot of nodding head. That's good. So this will be very helpful if you know the configuration manager, orchestrator, and some kind of scripting. So let's talk about that, why we started thinking about it. As I mentioned in my introduction, that we are part of the test team, which develops the configuration manager product, as well as we manage Microsoft IT for all the services related to configuration manager. We have a lot of challenges that we are upgrading the infrastructure quite often. It was like repetitive work, regular tasks. The upgrade process, if you see, it's same. In your environment, probably you are deploying new DP role, or some changes you are making. It could be configuration manager, or could be something else. Any nature of work which is repeatable, which means that is boring. You don't want to do it again and again, and you need to think of something that, hey, what we should do differently. That was a challenge for us, that, hey, we are not getting motivated for doing the same work again and again, even though it's a very important work. So that's what motivated us, that we want to do it differently. The second thing we want to, every time we do it, if the humans are involved, there's a possibility that we miss something. No standards, right? We have standard defines, we have a lot of pages of documentation, but it's very difficult to enforce those are followed every time when there's something is made, change, or something is implemented. So we had the challenge, and sometimes we come after the fact that some escalation or service downtime or service impact happened, and then we realize, oh, we did make this change, or we have deployed something and missed to configure correctly as it was documented. So that was a big challenge. As well as that, anything we want to automate, there is a lot of change happening. Means there are configuration manager 2012, then SP1, then Windows 2008 server is there, Windows 2012. We don't want to limit anything what we do automate is limited to those product and version. We want to do something where it can work without depending on the product version. So that is our goal, because at Microsoft IT, the change is happening very fast. Once you deploy some server code or any product, and within the 3 or 6 months, you probably have not even finished the previous deployment, the requests come that, hey, can you deploy the newer version? We are still deploying the previous version. So we don't want to have the version dependency on our any automation what we do. The post-deployment error, as I also mentioned, that the human error could possible. So those are the challenges, and we were living with those challenges not for 1 or 2 years, probably 5 or 6 years. These challenges were there from CCM 2007, and so we tried to make a change this time. So what we did a cuttlefish. Now you'll be wondering what this heck cuttlefish is. So one of my engineer in my team, he always comes with the unique or weird name for any project he does. So he came with a project name, Cuttlefish, for this entire solution. And why he named the cuttlefish? Because these are the objectives we had it, and the objective was that we do want to have the version dependency. We do not want to have a version dependency, that WSS 4.0 or configuration manager. And the cuttlefish is one of the aquatic animals which changes his skin based on the climate or based on this. So that's why he came with. That's just a description that why. So cuttlefish is the code name, just we named it internally in our team. And what is cuttlefish? It's nothing, it's just a execution engine within the orchestrator runbook which we had run. Or you can say orchestrator runbook. So just a name for it. So it is one runbook. What else we used? We used a lot of scripting. Means you can imagine that when we started this project, this PowerShell CMDlets, which are released now from Configuration Manager SP1, they were not available. So we have done a lot of scripting now, which is much easier to do in Configuration Manager as PowerShell. So you guys can do less code what we have done when we started this project. Also, we thought that whatever solution we do, we don't want to write the scripting from the scratch, because in the past 4 or 5 years, we have a lot of scripts available. We want to use those knowledge and the scripting. We don't want to say that, hey, everyone has to start a new script for this solution. We want to leverage whatever you have done in the past. The solution should be able to take anything what has been done in the past, and it should be very flexible. So that's why we, the technology-wise, we use System Center 2012 Orchestrator. We use System Center Virtual Machine Manager. And the reason we use for Virtual Machine Manager, because if there's a new role to be deployed, like management point, distribution point, or any other net new role, you want an automation which can handle it from end to end. So Virtual Machine Manager we use for deploying a new VM and adding the roles as a specific. So that was the purpose. The last thing was optional for us, but we have used and we want to share with you Visual Studio Team Foundation Server. And basically, this was the TFS, which we call internally, Team Foundation Server. We use internally for the project management and workflow. So when we are doing this project, we thought that since the already team is leveraging for all the project management work, we want to build some UI, and as well as we want to have a workflow system. So that can be tracked, who did it, who approved it, what he had done, so that is. But this can be your service manager or any other ticketing system what you use. We chose TFS or Team Foundation Server because it was already widely used in our Microsoft IT. But we know that it could be Service Manager, it could be a SharePoint, or it could be just a manual. So that is the last option. Overall, these are the things we are able to achieve as part of this thing. We don't do any repetitive work manually now. Everything needs to go with this solution. People have to build the files like config file or XML file. We'll talk about more. This is all automation. Manual touch is not there. It's not accepted. That if you are doing manual work for doing the repetitive work, there should be some exception. That is our philosophy. We are using all the scripts and templates we have created and explored with the team that go and use them. We also have achieved that they are, I will say, not zero is very aggressive. I will say that zero error happened. There are few errors still happen in the operations world, but they have significantly reduced the number of errors we used to happen in the deployment. So they are more standard, what we have defined, what we say, what we have documented, and that's what we deploy. And the last thing is the biggest for our management, that we have reduced the man hours, reduced the time it used to take to do the things, and also reduce the cost overall involved in the project. So that is we have reviewed. So before now, moving to next slide, I want to mention that in this session we have 75% of the demo. What we would like you to help us to pray that internet access is working all the time, no fire alarm, and as well as we have a demo God blessing us. So these are the three things we want to talk about. Let's talk about what the components are there in this solution before we go to the demo. There are only 2 slides, and we go to the demo after that. 3 things are there in this solution. One is the task execution engine, which is nothing, it's just an orchestrator. Second thing is the input files. Is like a configuration file, for example, what you want to do and where you want to do it. Simple words like, hey, I want to upgrade the server, what is the server name? So those are the input files you provide. And the third thing is a UI, because when we started this way, we gave the non-UI version like XML, and we thought that, oh, people are not understanding how to edit the XML very well. So that's why we built a UI simple, as a PowerShell UI, to make sure that they are only editing the fields which we want them in the XML and don't interact with the XML directly. So that is the 3 components of this solution. Another high-level overview of this solution. There are, as I mentioned, the first thing is the orchestrator runbook, which is the task engine overall, basically what execution, how to do it, and you want to kick off the runbook and done. The second part is that configuration file, which has 2 things. One is a task configuration file in the bottom one, and you will see the build configuration file. It will be much easier when you see the demo. The task is that I want to run the prerequisite first, and then I want to install some updates, configure IS, and then you do the task, and then I want to upgrade the server or install the new role, and then moving forward, or what is the success criteria, those are all defined in the task configuration. Then you go to the build configuration, you want to pass some parameters that, hey, what is the target server, where it should be done, what is the variable name. So those are the details you provide in this input file. So there are 2 input files, task configuration and build configuration, and we'll talk about in the demo how we do it. And so these are the overall concept of high-level approach of this architecture of the runbook. And you see that why have we have not hard-coded anything with the product or more specific, because we wanted to be a flexible solution that anybody can come and plug in the source bits, that this is the source of the deployment, and this automation shouldn't be dependent on the version information. It should be very easy that you define it. So these are 3 demos we are going to talk about. The first demo, we are going to show you live Service Pack 1 upgrade in one of the site. I don't know if you have seen any session where we do the upgrade in the session itself. So that's why we are doing the first demo, so that by the end of the session, we can show you the end-to-end SP1 upgrade. So that's the one demo. Second demo, we have to build new site. In front of you, we'll run the automation, and we'll build a new site. The third demo we are doing is the change. It's not a big thing, because if you go to the console, you can do the change. It's a big thing in a way that you do not want people to go to the console and make some mistakes. Even the small check mark can cause a big impact. We don't want people to make the mistake in the console, so we are providing the automation. If you are doing XYZ change, go and use this work runbook. And person has to just go and start the runbook, and that's it. So that's the 3 demo we are going to talk about. With this, I would like to hand over to Arun to start the demo.
All right. Thank you, Shitanshu. So a brief overview. I know we've been talking a lot, so just one more slide, I promise, and then we're going to the demos. Why are we doing the site upgrade? In our case, because we're part of the test team, we had to do it every 6 weeks. We were upgrading our environment like we started in the beginning. But in your case, it will help you, this automation will help you move to the newer features quicker. Like SP1 has a lot of great features. Like you have unified device management, you have automatic client upgrade, the PowerShell commandlets that help you automate a lot more. You can get to these features a lot faster. You can get to these features in your environment a lot faster by doing this. And at the same time, so Microsoft IT is actually a customer to us. And every time we go, hey, we say because we're trying to fulfill our goals for the test team, but we have to disrupt services for, however long it took. As a customer, they were not very happy about it. But this automation really helped us save a lot of time. And we'll share, after we kick off the demo, we'll share some of the results we've been able to achieve at Microsoft IT. And the benefits, not wanting to repeat myself again and again here, the seamless upgrade process, reduction in man hours, and the ability to reduce the manual errors, doing the post-validation to ensure that the site is working. So let's move quickly to the demo. So I have a primary site that is running the RTM version of Config Manager, build 507711. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some prerequisite tasks, and I'm going to upgrade the site to SP1. I'll actually kick off the upgrade first, and because it takes about half an hour for the upgrade to complete, and then explain what really happened behind the scenes from our automation perspective. So some of the other prerequisite tasks that I'm going to accomplish as part of this automation is I'm going to back up the log files, the previous setup log files, so that we have it for future reference. And we're going to disable some SQL jobs, and we're going to apply some folder permissions, and we're going to create a SQL backup of the previous prior to upgrade. So I will create a backup folder in this particular drive, and we'll save a backup of that particular file. So let's kick off the upgrade. So how many of you are familiar with this orchestrator web console? I guess about 50%. So right now I'm just waiting for it to prompt me for the input parameter. The only input parameter I'm going to have to provide here is a TFS task ID. The way we are set up is our task config and build config files that Shitanshu talked about earlier are already attached to the TFS work item. And once we kick it off, our orchestrator engine will essentially consume those files and start the upgrade process. So while that goes on, what we'll do is let's look at what actually the task and build config files look like. So this XML editor is actually a custom PowerShell UI-based XML editor that we built. Because even though we were building automation, having someone edit XMLs is quite a painful process and actually generates quite a few errors and it's its own. So we thought, let's simplify this process even further. We'll have a custom XML editor where we have what we call the task config and the build config file. In the task config file, all we're doing is we're importing all the different scripts that we run as part of our task config. So over here, I have a script for backing up the primary database. I have a script for backing up the CM logs, the config manager logs, the SQL jobs, running the actual upgrade, and then applying the shared permissions if any got reset. And the cool advantage of this UI, that this UI gives us, is it imports we have a standard with which we write our PowerShell scripts, so the UI automatically knows what are the variables that you need to pass for each particular script, and it highlights them in the switch field over here. And the build config is where you define where you're actually going to run this particular automation. The build config over here, I have a flat hierarchy. I'm saying I need to run this on the server name, which is the CISM 320 demo. And you see here on the right side the parameters. Essentially, this is imported from the task config. Essentially, it's displaying all the variables for each of the scripts in this particular field. And you would input the information here. Like the location for the backup is a variable for the backup PowerShell script. And we're providing the information of which folder it should store the backup in. And for config manager, for example, we have some, the upgrade script has some prerequisite requirements, such as what's the SQL server name, where are the prereq bits stored for config manager SP1, where are the source bits stored for config manager SP1, and we're providing all that information. Now, there's another key item that we talk about here is like the task IDs, the task start ID and the stop ID. So one of the things that we learned, because we were dealing with pre-release software, right? You can't always just fire off automation and forget about it. Although we'd all love to be there, it doesn't always work that way. A lot of times, as it evolved as we started upgrading our environments, that you would deploy something and it would fail, like, in step 1 or step 2, and then you had to go in and review the logs, fix that particular problem, work around it, and kick off the next process. So by having this task ID and the execute button, we're able to configure where, where and when, like what sequence of events need to be executed. Like I can configure the build config in a way that I say just run task 1 to 2, review the output. I'm satisfied. I can come back. I can edit the build config file and say now resume from steps 3 to 5. So it executes. Or I can say if I had the same steps executing on multiple servers, I could choose to execute it on one set of servers and not execute it on another set of servers till I'm satisfied that it's working on the first set of servers. Now, even for our solution, we have logging built in, where we post all our logs. This is the actual orchestrator server. There's a share on the orchestrator server where we create a folder based on the work item ID. And then we create a timestamped folder for when the actual execution was kicked off. So we have what's known as the arc log and the debug log. The arc log essentially shows where in the sequence of events the execution process is. Like in our case, we're seeing that the backup step has already been completed. The backup logs process has been completed. SQL jobs have been successfully completed. and we're now in the process of kicking off the execution of the actual upgrade. The debug log gives us additional information, like it gives actual output from the individual scripts that are running on the machine. So we have a function in there to output to a log file, and this comes very handy when you're saying you run into an error and you want to figure out exactly, you can go into the debug log and say, okay, why exactly did this PowerShell script fail at this particular step? It gives you the information. So kind of like best practices, excuse me, best practices for programming or scripting. Make sure you're logging your information. Make sure you have error checking in your code. And we're trying to follow some of those best practices. So going back to our session, these are some of the upgrade tasks that we've managed to automate at Microsoft IT as part of our production upgrade. And I will share in a little while we'll show you an actual build config and task config from a production upgrade, so you can see how complex it was and how much we were able to reduce thanks to this particular automation solution. So, processes such as, even doing a testDB upgrade, like backing up the database, moving it on a different server, restoring it, running the testDB upgrade, being able to automate that entire sequence of events really saved us a lot of time. We already talked about, being able to back up CM logs, copying the source bits, and we have some of the common items like, monitoring logs. Like as part of our solution, if we're doing the config manager setup, what we do is, in order to validate that step actually worked, we validate the config manager setup log, monitor that for errors, and if it's running into any critical errors, then we essentially fail. So that's how we're doing some of these common things that are not just specific to config manager. You can extract this to anything else. We can even do things like, if we wanted to set up like a prerequisite, an IIS prerequisite on a machine, or any custom application, and we know that it's going to generate a log, we can monitor those logs through this solution. And these are some of the results we've been able to achieve at Microsoft IT. We used to, like I said, we used to have our customer, Microsoft IT, we used to struggle trying to explain to them, yes, it will take a week for us to upgrade our environment because we have about 5 primary sites. We have 300,000 desktops to upgrade, and these 5 primary sites are set up globally. And I think we have, for the 14 secondary sites and countless DPs after that we have to upgrade. And even though we went through the process of taking a week to do it, there were a lot of manual errors, there were a lot of inconsistencies from one site to another. Sometimes, because we used to operate in a shift basis for some of these upgrades, like we would have like folks come in 8-hour shifts and do it. We noticed that sometimes even the process, like one person followed a certain process, making sure they checked all logs, all the components that the upgrade worked, but another person missed out. But with using this solution, we've been able to reduce that to 24 hours. And it's not just the config manager that we've been able to integrate. We use most of our environment as virtual. We've been able to integrate this solution with VMM to build virtual machines, build new roles where applicable. And again, we're reducing the kind of the handoff process and streamlining our overall operations thanks to this. We've even been able to, for our lab environment where we want a proof of concept or test something, we've been able to do it in such a fashion that we can build a custom domain, not just a config manager environment. We're able to spin up a domain controller. We're able to build a multi-tier config manager hierarchy, and we're able to even set up an Exchange server in that environment thanks to this automation in like 4 to 6 hours. Earlier, we used to have the struggle. Somebody has to create the virtual machine. Then that person, kicks off, and he doesn't want to monitor the whole process, so he goes off doing something else. And he comes back, and he's not sure where exactly he left off. He has to catch up. Those kind of human intervention is kind of avoided by being able to implement this automation.
And one thing I would like to share here that when we did the first time in the production, we gave this solution to our team. And we asked them, okay, you start this upgrade on Friday evening after end of day. And we said, okay, so usually when you start the process, it takes like a couple of days for completing the one day for primary side and doing all the validation. Second day, we woke up on Saturday morning and checking our mails, and we saw that they almost completed all the sites. And we were like surprised, is this automation worked? Because it was used to be take number of days. So we were not sure. We asked them to stop, not do anything else. We want to log into the server. We want to check whether this upgrade happened or not, because even though it was in the log, we couldn't believe it. So Arun literally asked the team, let me check personally in all the servers which have upgraded, whether it worked or not. And we were surprised that we have done all the lab work. It was happened like in July or August last year where we did the first time in production. And since then, we have been using like every month. And we have expanded the scope, just not config manager. Anything we do, use this framework kind of thing.
Yeah, and you can understand, if you're used to doing things over a week, you're skeptical when it happens in 24 hours. So let's look at the runbook in detail, the orchestrator runbook. So we actually have the top node of our orchestrator runbook is called start cuttlefish. And like I said, the only input parameter that we provide is the TFS work item ID. And the reason we provide we use TFS, because it's our ticketing system for now. Your solution doesn't, if you want to take this and adapt this to your environment, it doesn't have to be limited to TFS. You can choose to expand this to Service Manager if that's your choice, or if you have any other, like if you're using SharePoint, for instance, you can possibly even extend this to SharePoint. So, and the reason we also use TFS, we plugged in TFS into the system, is so we built a peer review process for our automation. So it's not just you build the scripts, you fire and forget. Somebody has to actually go in, like we built a process where one person builds the build and task config file, and then he puts the work item in a review state, and then another person has to actually come in, evaluate, and ensure that there are no mistakes, there are no something wasn't fat-fingered. And it also helps us from an audit process because it tells us who kicked off the actual runbook, and it tells us we're able to even everything you saw in those logs is also logged into our actual TFS ID. So that helps us from an audit process to go back and understand what happened, not just dependent on the logs, and we have a more permanent record that we can query. So some of the other runbooks within this particular, the overall runbook design is we have we have that initialize information where we have for process VMs, where process VMs is nothing but we already have a pre-existing VM and we're taking some existing an action based on that on a pre-existing VM. The bill VMs is pretty self-explanatory where we're using some of the VMM IPs or the integration packs as part of the deployment. And we're doing some of the, building the actual, kicking off the actual build process based on pre-existing VMM templates that we've built and, doing the actual VM build process. The build CM option gives us further, we have for different roles. Like this one particular, the process option gives you, this is what we executed right now, where we just piped in a bunch of scripts. This orchestrator engine is essentially going to determine where it needs to be executed. It will copy it locally onto the machine, and it will kick off the execution of the PowerShell script from there. So this helps us, in case we're not we're not always dependent on orchestrator. We don't have to every time edit the runbook. That's one of the key advantages we have with this custom framework that we built. One of the things we wanted to make sure is I don't want everybody to go in and have to edit the runbook every time. I can build the scripts, and because I'm using the standard task config and build config information, it's a fire and it's essentially you're using an external. It's kind of external to the runbook where you're using, so only our dev team has access to edit the runbooks. We're not opening up to everybody in the operations side, so that because we don't want folks to use the same runbook, make direct edits, and have issues because of that. So some of the things are standard, where we're calling modules within the existing runbook to execute certain tasks, like we saw for the creation of the VM. But for some of the other items, like if somebody wrote a new PowerShell script, we didn't want them to go in and have to create a new .NET object each time in Orchestrator. We had that in such a way that they could just provide that in the task and build config XML files, provide it in the work item after review, and the Orchestrator engine looked at that task and build config file. If it didn't apply to like a standard module that's already existing in the Orchestrator runbook, they would look at the script. Okay, it's a PowerShell script that I need to execute. Standard process, copy the file locally onto the target machine and execute it based on the variables provided. So let's look at the, I promised to show you the actual production upgrade file that we had to share how complex this was. Right, we have some error here. Let me close this and reopen it. Oh, I know what's wrong. It's having an issue with the space in the name.
So we found a bug?
Yes, we found a bug. Or maybe not.
Okay.
Weird.
While we are doing this, can we check the SP1? How's the
Yeah,
SP1?
let's go to the SP1 and check that, and we'll come back to this. So we're still executing the upgrade on the SP1. So why don't we move on, and we'll go on to the other modules, and then we'll come back and see if I can figure out what's wrong with that particular config file. So the next scenario we wanted to talk about is, building a new site system or role. And this, I believe, is a quite common scenario. So we have, in addition to Microsoft IT, we also provide config manager-based services to the Microsoft retail store. So the Microsoft stores that's opening in malls all over the country, if you're familiar with those. So every time a new store comes on board, we have to set up a new DP. We have to build a new distribution point role. And that's a quite common scenario, I think, for a lot of folks, where there's either there's an acquisition, for instance, or you're opening a new office and you want to build new roles. It could be a distribution point role, or if you have mergers where you want to build like an additional site there, or you want to install a management point role locally. And some of the issues we were having previously was it was taking a while, where you have, even though it's a pretty cookie cutter process, but there's still mistakes and inconsistencies where folks are missing basic steps, like they're not configuring IIS correctly, or those kind of steps that are pretty standard, but still, and sometimes because we're humans, we tend to get, to put it in a cocky, right? So we've done something enough times, we feel like, I know this process, and then we forget something quite obvious. But with being able to use this solution, we've been able to automate the DP onboarding process. We've been able to onboard the process where we're building a new site or building a new role, and we're distributing content. It's pretty simple, and we're avoiding all the human issues, and it's a quicker process now because we don't have somebody have to monitor, like everything is in progress. All they do is they monitor the logs, and they know that all steps 1 to 3 are going to automatically be kicked off. So let's look at another demo where we look at building a distribution point. So I have this primary site which does not have a distribution point role. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a distribution point role on this server, and I'm going to add this to a distribution point group. I'm going to add this to the demo distribution point group. So the idea being that if I had a site where we were targeting packages to a distribution point group, it's quite simple. I don't need to have another script to target packages to this particular DP. I just add this DP to the distribution point group, and it should get all the content that it requires. So let's look at the task config and the build config. So just a couple of simple scripts, installing the DP role, adding the DP role to the DP group, and again, we're providing the variables. The build config is which server we're targeting, what's the site code because we have to make a change at the primary site level, and which DP group we're adding this information to. So let's kick this off. While we wait for that, let's look at our, it showed up, and our upgrade is still in progress. And like the previous time, we just go to our share, where all the log files should be generated. We see a timestamp folder. It's closer to when we kicked it off, and it's already generated the orchestrator log. So this log is right now saying, because it's all based on the standard format where we have modularized, so the process where you see skipping CAS installation because we don't have any CAS-based modules to execute here. So in the run book, we actually had modules defined for each of our action on the different type of site roles. So that's why you see that logged here that that information is not being provided. There's no action on MPs. There's no action on software update points. The only action is for installing a DP over here. And it's already started where it copied the file onto the target server, and it's began the execution process. So while we wait on that, let's do another quick check, because I'm just waiting for see if I can make SP1 go any faster. So we'll give this a couple of more minutes, and we'll go back to the session and kick off, look at the next information, the next demo and the next scenario that we're going to talk about, and then we'll come back and look at both previously kicked off demos and see where we are. Some of the new build tasks that we've been able to automate is like, the VMM, using the standard VMM template, being able to create new VMs, the installation of roles that we talked about, and also like some of the basic tasks, the prerequisite tasks that we have for installing some of our config manager roles, such as being able to configure the firewall, being able to standardize the configuration of IIS, ADK, which is a prerequisite for config manager SP1, and even for our WSYS configuration and for the additional removal of boundaries. Let's look at scenario 3 for changing a site configuration. So why changing a site configuration? You may ask, like, it's a pretty simple change. I can just open the console, I just click a checkbox, I'm done. Why do I need to do this? But it's simple enough, but it's still, like, it's too powerful sometimes to leave it to a simple checkbox. These are like, there's high risk associated with somebody clicking the wrong checkbox, assigning the wrong site boundary, or for doing the wrong kind of discovery, or turning on the wrong kind of setting, which causes a lot of issues. And being able to automate this has really helped us eliminate the need for our operations or admin folks to have to access the console for every little change. And we're able to enforce a peer review process, and we're able to enforce a process where we can have a standard task config for if we know that these are the list of changes that need to go this particular week. We can queue them up, and in one particular weekend or one particular off business hour time change, we can say, execute these changes, even though they may be completely different changes. We can execute them as part of the same task config and build config file. And we'll look at a demo where we'll show you how simple it is to stitch together different kind of changes in one simple task config and build config file. So looking at our previous demo before we go to the next one, the DP role is already installed and looks like it's doing the DP group addition, and that's successful as well. So we'll validate that before we move on to the next demo. So this is the DP group. We should see a member. We see that there's a member associated with this right now. And we should see a DP distribution point role on the primary site, and we do. All right. So let's look at the next demo. So the next demo, what we're going to do is we're going to make changes that are kind of unrelated as part of the same build config and task config. We're going to configure the software update point to enable the FEP 2010 product. We're going to add some distribution point boundaries and boundary groups. And we're going to change the default client agent settings, and we're going to create a new client agent setting in there. So just to ensure that I'm not cheating, we'll just look at the settings previously before I kick off the process. So forefront endpoint protection 2010, not checked. Let's look at our boundaries. No boundaries. No boundary groups. Let's look at client agent settings. So for default client agent settings, what we'll do is we'll change, there's a customer name information or company name information in the computer agent settings. Right now it's set to MMS. We'll change this to Cuttlefish demo. It's a simple change, but this can be extended for even a more complex change if you wanted to. And we'll create another client agent setting where we'll enable bits and we'll enable the reboot setting. We'll check the reboot settings on that. And let's look at the task and build config file before we kick it off. Or actually, let's kick it off and then look at the task and build config file so that it's a lot faster.
While you're waiting, Arun, for the operations, the person who is going to execute this task, what is actually happening in the back end? Is this the only action he has to take?
This is the only action they have to take other than monitoring the logs afterwards. So we're not completely eliminating human touch. There's no replacement for human intelligence, right? Even though you do all of this, you still have, there may be scenarios where you have to go in and monitor like actual components or monitor actual, the setup logs for the actual application. But we're just making the process a lot simpler. So there's greater focus on the things that need attention versus trying to remember what you did last.
Right, got it.
That's kicked off. Let's look at the logs and see if the log files have been generated. The log files are already there. So one thing this does is from like an audit process, just to make it easier, every time you're kicking it off, you notice that it's also copying the build config and the task config file onto this share. So you have a record to say which particular build config or task config file was executed. This really helps in cases where we lock our task config file once it's uploaded onto the work item and it's in the right stage. But from a build config file, if there's somebody fat-fingered and they didn't have the right execution steps in there, this helps us make sure that, hey, you selected the wrong execution process in here. So that's why you're seeing that instead of just executing step 1 or from step 2 to 5, we're still trying to execute step 1 to 2 again.
One quick check I want to do here that how many of you think that this is a lot of work? This is not easy. How many of you think that? Well, it is true that the work we have done is very complex and a lot of work, but the complexity where it is there is not the runbook, it's the scripts. Because if you see that runbook is simple, it's just telling that, hey, which to be done, and it's the XML. That would not take probably a week to come with that runbook. The takes where months time could take if you start developing the script which you don't have ever. Because all the time you have always doing the work manually, need to think about, oh, where this setting is to be changed? What type of a script to be that? That is something we made it simple. We already have 20 or 25 scripts, something we are going to share with you. So you can start with as a learning and start using it. And also, there are like 400 plus PowerShell CMD LETs are released as part of SP1. So it will be easy for you to start with those. We wrote a line of codes which is not required anymore. So you can start much easier using that out of box. So if I have to give you some time estimate that where you have to end up, I would say that 1 week for the running the orchestrator and understanding how to start with runbook, see online demos, and a script, if you use it, probably 1 or 2 weeks. But if you have to start the script writing, I will say a month's work kind of thing for you. For us, it took like 6 months for overall, because we didn't have the script in the past. We always used to do it. Of 6 months, I'm talking about like final release. In the 6th month also, we started using from the first month itself and started adding more and more and more functionality. But I will say that for you guys, it won't be more than 1 month or few weeks, depending on how much script you have it. So if you just need a person who can write this PowerShell or any type of other script which is consumable, orchestrator, I will say don't worry about that, because runbook is easy part versus what complexity is in the script. I would say that if someone knows the orchestrator, 1 to 2 weeks.
So can you repeat your question?
UI.
The GUI?
Yeah.
We can make that publicly available.
Yeah.
We'll have to make some edits because there's some information that's tied to our environment. We have to edit that to make it open source.
Yeah, we can make it downloadable as well. Yeah, sure.
So while the setting change demo is still in progress, I do want to know that it's telling us that the SP1 hierarchy upgrade is completed, so let's validate that.
Awesome. Means I have never seen SP1 upgraded in the demo and the session itself. That's good. And the demo god is happy. That's cool.
Let's first check if we have a backup file folder.
SVC on the top.
Yep, we have a backup folder. We have the backup file of the database, the config manager database. Let's check if the log files are backed up. We see that there's a timestamp folder here, and the previous log files, the config manager setup log files are backed up. But the biggest moment of truth will come when we check the config manager, whether the config manager site has been upgraded. We'll wait for it to come up. There we go. There we go. SP1 upgrade. So let's look at our other demo and see where we are. This one was 4. Okay, we're in step 4 where it's configuring the software update product. So we have a few more minutes to go.
We can take a few questions while we are waiting for the demo. If you have anyone has question, we can take a few questions here. Yes.
Can we get you to come over to the mic so everybody can hear your question?
A small exercise.
So you've got all these sequences that you've got lined up, and you can see we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. If one of them fails, can you restart from that point on?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's where I brought the build config file. That's where the build config file comes in handy, where you can say the task ID and start and stop ID. So say for task 1 to 5, it failed at step 3. So you can come back. You say you did whatever correction in your environment. You can come back and edit the build config file to say run from task start ID 4 and to stop ID 5, and then kick off the whole process again. So that's one of the things that we specifically wanted to do because we were dealing with pre-release software. We didn't know whether we wanted to be able to do that so that if anything fails in between, we're able to control the sequence. Also, from our production hierarchy upgrade standpoint, we were upgrading the CAS and 5 primary sites. We wanted to make sure that when we did that, like we did the CAS, we only executed the sequence for the CAS first, validated that everything was working before we proceeded to the next primary. And we did it in a fashion that we did not proceed to the next site till the first site was done, so that it gave us enough validation time to ensure that we didn't. If there was a problem in one particular site, we didn't make sure we kind of exasperated that by having that on all our sites. So let's go back to our log file, see where we are. This is the computer agent. So this demo is done as well. Let's look at the settings. So let's look. One of the items was the client agent settings, right? So we created a custom setting that didn't exist previously. And this one should have bits and the computer restart property selected, and it does. The next one was we were going to change the default client settings. We were going to change the company name to Cuttlefish Demo from MMS. And that's done as well. Let's look at the boundaries and boundary groups. So we should have 2 boundaries, and we will define one as fast and the other as slow. So we have a couple of boundaries defined which didn't previously exist. And we have boundary groups defined as fast and slow. And the other item was the software update point configuration. So let's look at that as well. I need to go in sites, that's why. It will come there. So we were going to enable the forefront endpoint protection 2010 agent, so we should see that shortly. Going under products and scrolling down. There we go. The
Awesome.
forefront endpoint protection 2010 agent is selected. So let's go back to the session and see where we are. And I'll work on the, see if I can get the production task config and build config file to show up so we can share some of that complexity with you. There you go.
Thank you, Arun, and great job in demo because we all completed 3 demo, which was, we were crossing our fingers whether all will work or one will work, because all this demo which we showed you are connecting back to the Redmond, and all these, because it was not easy to build the demo environment in here itself, because we have a TFS, we have the configuration manager, we need a lot of VMs, so we built everything there, and we have strong dependency on the internet to work there. So let me show you end-to-end workflow what it looks like. This is the picture where it starts and ends. If you see the first person, which is called as requester, that's the person who goes and fill the information like build config or task config and provide that, hey, I want to upgrade SP1, or I need a new DP, or something like that. He goes and fill that information. Then what happens, after filling that information in the UI, it goes to the person who is a peer reviewer. That's the second person. And we have made this process just for make sure that nobody make a mistake and goes directly. A peer review task is that either he can approve it or he can reject it. If he rejects it, it goes back to the requester. If he approves it, what it goes to the implementer. That's a third person, you can say. An implementer is an operations guy, a person who is going to execute it. His task is only the role what Arun has shown in the demo. He will go to the orchestrator web console. He will put the work item number and say, done. That's it. So overall, and the rest is like all automated from the orchestrator. So if you look into the persons involved, a requester, a peer review, and the implementer. An implementer is a person who can just know how to open the browser, and he knows the link for where the web console is there, and just type the work item. That's it. And of course, if the failure happens, he need to look into it, or the known issue, or he need to escalate to further. So that is the thing happening where the implementer. So there are 3 human touch happening for entire process, whether it's building a new site, or it's an upgrade, or whatever the task you want to automate. So there are 3 human touch points, and rest of the things orchestrator is doing at the end. So that is, we wanted to show that what it looks like, the entire story. Second thing is about the lesson learned. As we talked about the operations or engineering excellence, it's come from the people, process, and technology. Neither technology can solve the problem alone, neither people can solve the problem alone. All things to come together. So we can handle the technology part, but still people have to follow the technology. So I think that whatever the automation will do, there is still dependency on the human. We cannot pass that. So we want to make sure that we have a process where people are following it. A second thing, we want to make sure that follow the best practices of the scripting. As one thing we most commonly miss that, hey, we want to automate this, we go ahead, write a code. What we miss that, how this can be audited, where is the logging happening, who did it, what did it, and when he did it. All these things, it is very, very important. And the workflow, so that if the script is not working, you know that where it fails. So we basically try a practice where if someone is writing a code, he needs to write a functional specs, a workflow of that script. A script will do X, then Y. If this Y fails, then it will go to this branch. That he has to write the code. So that if there's someone leave in the team and someone has to review the script, he knows exactly where to modify by reading it. So there are some best practices of the scripting. Do not allow that, hey, anybody can create the script and it's difficult to maintain and manage it. So and also the logging and auditing is very, very important. And the third part is that test it thoroughly. Means we are managing production environment. A script will do whatever you have written in the code. We have tested many, many times before we take it into the production, because our management was also saying, are you sure that you want to upgrade it? Many times I have to convince the Arun that, hey, go ahead, test it and deploy in production. I'm fully confident. And it was like challenge that, hey, well, we don't know. But it was always a positive because we have tested thoroughly and each test cases. So that is something we would like to share with you, that testing is as critical as any other step. With this, here is the link. We have you want to check it?
Oh, yeah, so I actually have the thing working. Looks like it was an error between keyboard and person. So it's resolved now. We have a task config file. This is the actual production task config file that we used, where you can see there are multiple modules. Just for like for this central administrative side, we were doing such things as, running some pre-upgrade checks, backing up the database, some of the pretty obvious database backup items, actually running the upgrade, even doing something like the MOF changes, importing MOF changes, applying share permissions. And we had this for each kind of role. Like for primaries, we were doing a similar thing. And we even had an upgrade process for the secondary site. And looking at the build config file, look at the list of servers we had to execute this on. So you can see about 13 servers, 13 secondary sites in there, 5 primary sites in there, and 1 central administrative site. So it became even more critical for us. Like one gentleman over there asked, like, can we control this? So that became really critical for us in being able to execute this on these many servers in parallel. So with that, hand over back to Shtanshu.
Thank you, Arun, for covering that. You can see that for the CAS upgrade, we have like 14 tasks to be done, and for the primaries, we have like 11 tasks, and these tasks can go in any order as we want. Now, where these scripts are, as I mentioned that runbook is easy part, most time-consuming is the scripting. So whatever is task we have shown the demo, all these scripts are uploaded in the SkyDrive, and I have the by folder. You can see that you can download this script from these folders. Well, one thing I want to call out, that in this script, you can write a better script because of the PowerShell CMDlets. We might have done longer line of code because the time we wrote it, it was not available. So these are not the best script. These are scripts which are working and we have used in production, and it is kind of supported by us in a way that we have used it. Other links I want to say that go and download all the PowerShell CMDlets from the SP1, which is very helpful. And there are some other tools I just wanted to share, that content library transfer, if you have not heard about it, is very useful for the migration or adding new DPs and getting the content. So that. With this, what I want action from you guys, that think about the automation. Means not the configuration manager, could be anything else what you do it. It's going to. The philosophy is that means you can do more with less, as well as you can get better results and more standard outputs. You can start using our shared scripts and give us the feedback if you have anything which we would like to hear next year in MMS, or what are the things we did well or we need to improve from our side. With this, we would like to finish, and thank you, everyone. These are some of the related content. These are all sessions already happened, but if you want to go and check out our MSIT session, we have a few more sessions which were there, and some links, and we want to hear your feedback. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. If anyone wants to ask a question, a microphone, or you can stop by, we are here.